Jonathan Hayes was walking down the busy streets of the city, his shoes clicking on the wet pavement. The rain had stopped only a few minutes ago, leaving behind puddles that reflected the bright lights of the shops and the movement of the people rushing to their destinations. He usually preferred to drive, but today he wanted to take a walk. Away from the quiet luxury of his office and the endless meetings that consumed most of his days, something inside him had been telling him to step out, to feel the city in a way he hadn't in years. As he moved through the crowd, he noticed the usual sights: street vendors shouting their sales, children playing near the corners, people hurrying with umbrellas in hand. Life was moving fast, as it always did. As he turned a corner near a small alley, he saw a boy sitting alone on the curb. The child looked no older than 10. His clothes were old, torn, and soaked from the rain. His shoes were broken, and his feet were bare, pressed against the cold, wet pavement. He held an empty cup in his small hands, not asking for anything, not even making a sound. But the look in his eyes froze Jonathan in his steps. There was a hunger there, not just for food, but a deep, silent longing that went beyond what any adult could fully understand. Jonathan had seen children before who needed help, but there was something different about this one. Something raw and real. For a moment, Jonathan just stood there, watching him. The boy looked up briefly, his eyes meeting Jonathan's, and for an instant, it felt like time slowed down. There was no fear, no anger, just a quiet awareness, a small, fragile hope that someone might notice him. Jonathan felt a pull in his chest, an unfamiliar tightness, as if something inside him recognized the boy's struggle. He couldn't explain it. He wasn't someone who usually let emotions get the better of him. Today was different. He stepped closer and crouched down, trying to make himself less intimidating. "Hey there," he said softly. The boy looked at him, eyes wide, unsure if he should answer. Jonathan smiled gently, careful not to scare him. "Are you okay? Do you want some food?" The boy hesitated, then shook his head slightly. Jonathan noticed the faint tremble in his hands, the way his lips pressed together, dry and cracked. I'm fine," the boy whispered. Jonathan could tell it was not entirely true, but he didn't push. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small sandwich he had bought from a cafe nearby. He held it out. "Here, take this. You must be hungry." The boy's eyes widened, and for the first time, a small smile appeared on his face. He took the sandwich slowly, almost reverently, and began to eat. Jonathan watched him, noticing how carefully he handled each bite, how he seemed to savor every taste like it was a treasure. It made Jonathan feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, a deep, human connection. The kind that reminded him why life was more than numbers, contracts, and meetings. As the boy ate, Jonathan sat on the curb beside him, keeping his distance, but making sure the child felt safe. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The boy looked up, his eyes reflecting both caution and curiosity. "I'm Amir," he said softly. Jonathan nodded. "Amir, that's a strong name. Do you live around here?" Amir shook his head. "I live. I stay where I can," he murmured, looking down at the sandwich again. "I take care of my sister." Jonathan felt a pang of guilt and sadness. "You have a sister?" Amir nodded, his small shoulders hunched as if carrying a weight far heavier than a child should ever bear. "She's younger. She can't do much. I try to help her," he said quietly. Jonathan didn't know what to say. The world he lived in, full of luxury and privilege, had never exposed him to this kind of suffering so directly. He had given money to charity before, written checks to support causes, but standing here, seeing Amir with his own eyes, feeling the truth of hunger and struggle, it was different. It was real. It was human. For a while they sat in silence. The sounds of the city continued around them, the chatter of people, the distant honk of car horns, the soft trickle of water from the rain, but in that small corner, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Jonathan noticed the grime on Amir's hands, the dirt under his nails, the way his hair clung to his forehead from the dampness. He noticed the subtle way Amir flinched whenever someone passed too close. Jonathan realized how vulnerable this child was. how alone he truly was in a world that often looked the other way. Jonathan decided to talk a little more carefully, gently. "Do you go to school?" he asked. Amir shook his head again. "I can't. I have to work," he admitted. "I collect scraps sometimes. Whatever I can find to sell. To buy food for my sister?" Jonathan felt a heavy ache in his chest. The thought of a child carrying responsibilities like that, working in the streets instead of playing, learning, growing in the safety of school and home was almost unbearable. He wanted to do more than just give a sandwich. He wanted to help in a way that mattered, that could change the course of this child's life. He looked around the alley and then back at Amir. "Do you want to come with me somewhere warm? You can eat something properly, and we can talk," he offered. Amir's eyes flickered with uncertainty. I can't," he said softly. "I have to go back to my sister." Jonathan nodded slowly. He understood. The boy's loyalty and love for his sister were clear. "I get it," he said. "But maybe I can help both of you. I don't want to interfere, but I want to make sure you're safe. Can I do that?" Amir looked at him, hesitation written all over his small face. Finally, after a long pause, he nodded slightly. "Maybe. Just for a little while." Jonathan smiled warmly. "That's all I ask." He guided Amir carefully through the crowded streets to a small cafe nearby. Once inside, the warmth hit them both. Jonathan ordered a simple meal for Amir, a plate of hot food, something the boy hadn't likely tasted in a long time. Amir's eyes lit up as he took the first bite, and for the first time that day, Jonathan saw a spark of relief, of comfort. He sat across from Amir, watching him eat, feeling a sense of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just an encounter. It was the beginning of something important. They talked quietly as Amir ate. Jonathan asking gentle questions, Amir answering in short, hesitant sentences. He spoke of his sister, of the small apartment they had once shared with their parents, of the struggles to survive each day. Jonathan listened, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on a child who deserved none of it. And in that listening, he began to understand the depth of the problem. The reality of hunger and poverty existed just streets away from his own life of comfort. By the time Amir had finished his meal, Jonathan felt a determination growing inside him. He knew this encounter couldn't end here. He couldn't just give a sandwich and walk away, pretending the problem didn't exist. He had to do something. He didn't know yet what that would be, but he felt it in his bones, a responsibility, a calling, a chance to make a difference in a way that truly mattered. As they left the cafe, Jonathan could see a small change in Amir. Not just the satisfaction of a meal, but a glimmer of hope. The boy walked a little taller, his steps a little steadier. Jonathan felt a deep sense of connection, the kind that only comes when you look into someone's eyes and truly see them. He knew this was just the beginning, that the real journey was ahead. And he also knew, without a doubt, that his life had changed in that moment forever. By the sight of hunger in a child's eyes and the silent plea for help it carried after that first encounter, Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about Amir and his sister. The image of the small boy sitting on the curb, hungry and tired, kept replaying in his mind. He felt a strange mix of sadness, guilt, and determination. He had always known there were children struggling in the city, but seeing it with his own eyes, seeing it so close, made it real in a way that statistics and news reports never could. Jonathan knew he had to do something beyond just a meal or a kind word. He wanted to make sure Amir and his sister were safe and had a chance at a better life. The next morning, Jonathan woke up early, unusually restless, despite his comfortable bed and quiet house. He couldn't shake the thought of Amir and the responsibility that had quietly settled on his shoulders. He dressed quickly, grabbing his coat and wallet, and headed back to the streets where he had met the boy. The city was just waking up, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. Jonathan moved carefully, scanning the streets, hoping to find Amir again. It didn't take long. Just a few blocks away, he saw the boy sitting in the same alley, holding his cup and looking smaller than the day before. Jonathan approached slowly, smiling. Amir looked up, surprised, then a little relieved. He hadn't expected to see the man again. "Good morning," Jonathan said softly. "I thought I'd come back. Are you okay?" Amir shrugged. "I'm fine," he whispered. His voice was tired, but there was a hint of recognition and trust in it. Jonathan nodded and sat on the edge of the curb, careful to give the boy space. He didn't want to overwhelm him, only to offer support. "Amir, I want to help you and your sister," Jonathan said gently. "I don't want to just give you food today. I want to make sure you're safe and that you have a chance to go to school, to be kids, to have a life that doesn't feel so heavy all the time. Would you let me do that?" Amir hesitated, looking down at his hands. He had learned not to trust adults too quickly, not to believe promises, because so many had come and gone without helping. But something in Jonathan's eyes, calm and sincere, made him pause. He nodded slowly. "Maybe. Just maybe," he said. Jonathan smiled. "That's all I ask." He reached into his pocket and took out a small notebook, a pen, and some money. "I thought maybe we could start by getting you and your sister a warm place to stay today. Just for now, until we figure out a plan." Amir's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Jonathan replied. "Come with me." They walked through the city, avoiding the busiest streets, until they reached a small, quiet guest house Jonathan had arranged. The owner, a kind woman who trusted Jonathan's judgment, welcomed them warmly. The room was simple but clean, with 2 beds, fresh sheets, and a small bathroom. For the first time in a long time, Amir looked like he could breathe without worry. After settling in, Jonathan asked Amir about his sister. "Where is she now?" "She's outside." "Waiting," Amir said. Jonathan nodded and asked Amir to bring her inside. When she arrived, it was clear she was even smaller than her brother. With a shy smile and clothes that were too big and torn, Jonathan knelt to greet her, offering a small stuffed toy he had brought. She hugged it tightly, her eyes wide with a mix of wonder and caution. For the rest of the morning, Jonathan sat with the children, talking quietly, learning about their life. They had lost their parents when they were very young, and since then, Amir had taken on the role of protector, provider, and caretaker. He scavenged and worked small jobs, making sure his sister had something to eat and a safe place to sleep. Jonathan listened, amazed at the strength and resilience of this boy, and at the same time heartbroken at how much burden a child had to carry by the afternoon. Jonathan realized he had to do more than just provide temporary shelter. He wanted to find a sustainable way to help them. He began making calls, contacting trusted friends who could help with schooling, healthcare, and basic necessities. He also arranged for them to have regular meals and access to clothing. It was the beginning of a plan that would slowly, step by step, transform their lives. Over the next few days, Jonathan continued to spend time with Amir and his sister. He taught Amir small lessons about life, kindness, and resilience. He encouraged the children to share their thoughts and fears, making sure they knew that it was okay to ask for help and that they were not alone. The children began to open up, slowly letting the walls they had built for survival come down. Jonathan noticed small changes. Amir smiled more. The younger sister laughed, and for the first time in years, there was a sense of safety and warmth in their eyes. Jonathan also made sure to introduce the children to simple routines, things that most children took for granted: regular meals, hygiene, and learning activities. They went to the library, read books together, and even visited a nearby park where Amir's sister could play freely. Jonathan watched with a quiet pride as the children explored these new experiences, realizing that this was more than charity. It was giving them a chance to reclaim their childhood. Evenings were spent quietly in the room they were staying in. Jonathan would sit with the children, sharing stories about the world, explaining how he had started his life, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. The children listened with fascination, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just absorbing the stories. It was a small connection, but it built trust and a bond that would be important in the days to come. Throughout this time, Jonathan also reflected on his own life. He had spent years chasing wealth and success, often forgetting the human side of life. Seeing Amir and his sister made him realize how fragile and precious life was, and how a single moment of kindness could change everything. He vowed to do more, not just for these children, but for others in need as well. As the days turned into a week, the children began to show signs of improvement. Amir's health improved slightly, and his sister grew more confident and playful. Jonathan could see the difference that care, stability, and kindness could make. It was a reminder that even in the midst of hardship, hope could grow, and small actions could have profound effects. Jonathan knew that the journey was just beginning. Helping Amir and his sister was not about temporary relief. It was about creating opportunities, safety, and a future. He was committed to walking this path with them, to guiding them, protecting them, and giving them a chance at a life they deserved. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a deep sense of purpose, one that went beyond business deals and material success. He realized that seeing the hunger in a child's eyes had not only changed the children's lives, it had changed his own. As the days passed, Jonathan realized that temporary solutions could only go so far. Feeding Amir and his sister and providing them a safe place to sleep was important, but he knew that for real change, they needed education, structure, and long-term support. He spent hours researching local programs, schools, and community centers that could help. He wanted to make sure that the children could grow up safely and that they would have opportunities he hadn't even imagined when he was young. Jonathan also realized that trust had to be built gradually. Amir had learned early in life that adults could not always be counted on, that promises could be broken, and that people often looked away from hardship. Jonathan made sure to keep his promises, no matter how small, and showed consistency in his actions. Every meal, every kind word, and every bit of time he spent with Amir and his sister was part of a larger plan to show them that they could rely on someone. One morning, Jonathan arrived at the guest house with a surprise. He had arranged a meeting with a local school principal, someone known for supporting children from difficult backgrounds. Jonathan explained Amir's situation, and the principal agreed to enroll him immediately, making sure he could attend classes and catch up on the studies he had missed. Jonathan watched Amir's eyes widen with a mix of excitement and nervousness. It was clear that the boy had never had a real chance to attend school, and this opportunity was overwhelming in the best possible way. Amir's sister, though younger, was also eager to learn. Jonathan found a nearby preschool where she could start building the basics she had missed. He knew that education would be a foundation for their future, giving them skills and confidence that would stay with them forever. The first day of school was a mix of excitement and fear. Amir held Jonathan's hand tightly as they walked into the classroom. The teacher greeted them warmly, and Jonathan could see the boy slowly relax as he took his seat. Throughout the day, Jonathan kept in touch with the school, making sure Amir was comfortable and supported. By the time he returned in the afternoon, Amir had stories to tell, small victories and challenges alike. He was learning not just academics but also social skills, how to communicate with others, and how to feel safe in a structured environment. Jonathan also wanted to make sure the children experienced normal childhood joys. He took them to the park, the library, and even to small local events where they could interact with other children. He encouraged play, creativity, and exploration, knowing that these moments were crucial for emotional growth. Watching Amir throw a ball or seeing his sister laugh as she played in the swings, Jonathan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. These simple moments, which he had taken for granted in his own childhood, were transformative for the children. But Jonathan knew the journey wouldn't always be easy. There were days when Amir would come home tired, frustrated, or discouraged. He would struggle with homework, or he would feel the weight of responsibility for his sister pressing on his small shoulders. Jonathan didn't shield him from challenges. Instead, he guided him, offering advice, encouragement, and patience. He taught Amir that it was okay to fail, to feel upset, and to ask for help. Lessons that were as important as any academic subject. In addition to education, Jonathan focused on life skills. He taught Amir about money, saving, and responsibility in age-appropriate ways. They cooked meals together, cleaned the room, and learned routines that helped build independence. Jonathan wanted Amir to feel capable, not just cared for. He wanted the boy to realize that he could handle responsibilities without being overwhelmed by them. Meanwhile, Amir's sister thrived in her preschool. She began to develop confidence, speak clearly, and express her emotions. Jonathan encouraged her curiosity and creativity, buying small art supplies and books that would allow her to explore and learn. He saw the spark of potential in her, a light that had been dimmed by poverty and struggle. Now growing brighter with every passing day, Jonathan also worked to connect the children with the wider community. He introduced them to neighbors, friends, and other families, helping them build a network of support. He wanted them to feel that they belonged to a world that could be kind and nurturing, a world they had not fully experienced before. Over time, Amir began to trust more, to open up to others, and to feel that he was not alone in his journey. One day, Jonathan took the children to a local market to buy groceries together. It was a simple outing, but it became a lesson in choice, budgeting, and decision-making. Amir learned how to select fresh food, compare prices, and plan meals for the week. His sister followed along, imitating the steps and picking small items she could help carry. Jonathan watched them with pride, knowing that these small skills were laying the foundation for a more independent and confident future. Jonathan also realized the importance of celebrating achievements. He made a point to acknowledge Amir's academic successes, no matter how small, and encouraged his sister's artistic and social progress. He praised effort, perseverance, and kindness, reinforcing the idea that they were capable and valued individuals. Over time, the children began to internalize this belief. Gaining self-esteem and hope, evenings were often spent together, reading stories, sharing experiences, and reflecting on the day. Jonathan encouraged the children to talk about their feelings, their fears, and their dreams. He listened with patience, never dismissing their concerns, and offered guidance when needed. This emotional support was as important as any practical help, helping the children feel seen, understood, and cared for as weeks turned into months. The changes in Amir and his sister became increasingly visible. Amir was more confident, engaged in school, and learning to express himself without fear. His sister was thriving socially and emotionally, developing skills and independence at a remarkable pace. Jonathan felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that his efforts were making a real difference. But he also knew that the journey was ongoing, that consistent support, guidance, and care would be needed for years to come. Jonathan reflected on the lessons he had learned through this experience. He had always believed that wealth was measured in numbers, in assets, and in material success. But through Amir and his sister, he discovered that true wealth lay in human connection, in kindness, and in the ability to make a meaningful difference in someone's life. The act of helping them was not a charitable duty. It was a transformative experience that enriched his own life in ways he had never imagined. The journey of transformation for Amir and his sister was far from over, but the progress they had made in a short time was remarkable. Jonathan felt a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility, knowing that he could continue to guide and support them as they grew. He had seen the power of compassion and commitment, and he was determined to continue walking this path, ensuring that the children not only survived but thrived in those quiet moments. As he watched Amir and his sister sleep peacefully in their safe room, Jonathan understood the profound impact of human connection. He realized that a single act of noticing, caring, and committing could create ripples that changed lives forever. And in that realization, he found a deeper sense of meaning, one that would shape not only the children's future, but his own, in ways that he had only begun to comprehend. Months had passed since Jonathan first met Amir and his sister, and the changes in the children were remarkable. Jonathan had committed himself fully to helping them, not just with immediate needs, but by creating a path for their long-term growth. He had arranged regular schooling, provided safe housing, and ensured they had access to meals, healthcare, and life skills training. Each day, he watched Amir grow more confident and resilient, while his sister began to thrive in her own way. Exploring the world with curiosity and joy, Jonathan made it a point to spend quality time with the children every day. He knew that consistency was key, not just for stability, but for trust. Amir had learned that Jonathan would keep his word, that he could rely on him, and that he was not alone. The boy had started to open up more, sharing his thoughts, worries, and dreams. Jonathan listened carefully, offering advice when needed, but allowing the children to make their own choices and learn from them. One afternoon, Jonathan decided to take the children on a trip to the countryside. It was a place far from the city's noise and chaos, where the air was fresh and nature surrounded them. The children had never seen such open spaces, fields stretching endlessly, and the simple beauty of trees and streams. They ran freely, laughed without worry, and even splashed in a small creek. Jonathan watched them with a smile, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Moments like these were not just fun, they were lessons in freedom, joy, and the innocence that every child deserved. During the trip, Jonathan also took the opportunity to teach Amir practical skills. They learned to identify plants, care for animals, and understand the basics of growing food. Jonathan wanted Amir to gain a sense of self-reliance and confidence, to know that he could handle challenges and that life offered opportunities if approached with patience and effort. Amir listened intently, absorbing the knowledge, and occasionally asking thoughtful questions that showed his growing curiosity and intelligence. Back in the city, Jonathan continued to focus on education. He worked closely with Amir's teachers, ensuring that he received extra help to catch up on the subjects he had missed. The boy showed remarkable dedication, staying after school sometimes to work on lessons. Jonathan provided encouragement, showing him that effort and persistence mattered more than immediate perfection. Over time, Amir began to excel, not only academically, but also socially, learning to interact with peers, express himself, and develop leadership skills that had been suppressed by years of struggle. Amir's sister was also blossoming. Jonathan encouraged her creative abilities, providing art supplies, books, and opportunities to explore her imagination. He celebrated her small successes, praising effort and creativity rather than focusing only on results. This approach helped her build confidence and self-esteem, laying the foundation for a positive mindset that would guide her. Through life, Jonathan understood that emotional support was as important as practical help. He encouraged the children to express their feelings, to talk about fears, and to share their experiences. They would often sit together in the evenings, discussing the day, reflecting on successes, and learning from mistakes. Jonathan's calm and patient demeanor helped the children feel safe and valued, reinforcing the idea that they were not alone and that their lives mattered. As the children grew more confident, Jonathan began introducing them to small community projects. He wanted them to understand the value of helping others and the power of kindness. Together, they would volunteer at local shelters, help clean public spaces, or participate in community events. Jonathan emphasized that even small actions could have meaningful impact, teaching them empathy, responsibility, and social awareness. Jonathan also worked to expand their world beyond the immediate environment. He took them to museums, libraries, and cultural events, exposing them to new ideas and experiences. He wanted them to see possibilities beyond their current circumstances, to dream, and to realize that life offered opportunities if they pursued them with courage and dedication. Each trip was a lesson, each conversation a building block for their future. One evening, Jonathan noticed Amir struggling with a difficult math problem. Instead of giving the answer, he guided the boy through the steps, encouraging him to think critically and patiently. Amir's face lit up when he solved it, the sense of accomplishment clear in his smile. Jonathan knew these small moments were shaping the boy's confidence and teaching resilience. He wanted Amir to understand that life's challenges could be met with persistence, creativity, and problem-solving. Jonathan also focused on building a sense of identity and pride in the children. He encouraged Amir to share stories about their past, to talk about their experiences, and to recognize their strength and resilience. This process was not always easy. Children had faced hardships that no child should endure, but Jonathan provided a safe space for reflection, helping them understand that their past did not define them and that they could shape their own future through all of this. Jonathan remained consistent and reliable. He continued to provide financial support, but more importantly, he provided guidance, mentorship, and presence. The children learned that stability and consistency were as important as any material assistance. They began to trust, to hope, and to envision a future that was once unimaginable, as the months turned into a year. The changes in Amir and his sister were evident to everyone around them. Amir's teachers praised his academic progress and social skills, noting his growing leadership and confidence. His sister's creativity, curiosity, and social abilities were developing beautifully. Jonathan felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the children were thriving not just because of material support, but because of the holistic approach he had taken, addressing education, emotional health, social skills, and life experiences. Jonathan also noticed a transformation within himself. His life, once focused solely on work and material success, had become richer in meaning and purpose. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in money, but in the impact one could have on the lives of others. The connection he had formed with Amir and his sister, the progress he had witnessed, and the bond of trust and love had changed his perspective forever. One quiet evening, as they sat together reading books and talking about their day, Jonathan reflected on the journey. The children had grown so much, and yet he knew there was still work to be done. They still faced challenges, but now they had skills, confidence, and support to navigate life more effectively. Jonathan felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility, knowing that his commitment had made a real difference and that the future was full of hope for these children. Jonathan realized that this journey was not just about helping two children. It was about understanding the power of compassion, patience, and dedication. He had witnessed firsthand how small actions, consistent care, and emotional support could transform lives. The experience had strengthened his belief in human connection and the profound impact one person could have on the world. As he looked at Amir and his sister, laughing and sharing stories, Jonathan felt a sense of peace and purpose that he had never known before. He understood that life was not just about wealth or success, but about the difference one could make in the lives of others. And in that understanding, he found a joy and fulfillment that would guide him for the rest of his life. The journey was ongoing, but the progress was undeniable. And the bond between them had grown into something lasting, meaningful, and life-changing. Years had passed since Jonathan first noticed the hunger in Amir's eyes. What began as a simple act of kindness a meal shared on a rainy street had transformed into a life-changing journey for both Amir and his sister, and for Jonathan himself. The children had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. Amir had finished school, excelling in his studies, and his sister had blossomed into a curious, joyful young girl, eager to learn and explore the world. Jonathan had watched every step of their growth with pride. Knowing that the foundation he had helped build would last a lifetime, Amir had started to dream bigger than he ever had before. With Jonathan's guidance and support, he had applied to a scholarship program that would allow him to continue his education. He was nervous at first, uncertain if he deserved the opportunities he was being given. But Jonathan reassured him that hard work and determination had always been enough to open doors. When Amir received the acceptance letter, he ran to Jonathan, holding it tightly in his hands, his eyes shining with joy. It was a moment that symbolized more than just academic success. It was the reward for resilience, courage, and the belief that one could overcome even the harshest beginnings. Meanwhile, Amir's sister had found her passion in the arts. She loved to draw and paint, creating vibrant scenes inspired by the world around her. Jonathan encouraged her creativity, providing supplies and opportunities to showcase her work. She had grown confident in her abilities, understanding that her voice mattered and that she could express herself freely. Watching her paint, Jonathan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Knowing that both children had developed a sense of identity, pride, and purpose, Jonathan continued to teach them life lessons, helping them understand the importance of kindness, integrity, and empathy. He shared stories of his own journey, including the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned along the way. The children listened intently, absorbing not only the words but also the values behind them. Jonathan wanted them to know that success was not measured by wealth alone, but by the positive impact one could have on the lives of others. As the years went by, Jonathan encouraged Amir to give back to the community. Together, they started small initiatives to help other children facing difficulties similar to those Amir had experienced. They visited shelters, organized donation drives, and supported educational programs. Amir saw firsthand the difference that kindness and support could make, and he began to understand the responsibility that came with opportunity. Jonathan guided him, not taking over, but allowing Amir to lead and make decisions. Fostering confidence and leadership, Amir's sister also became involved. Using her artistic talents to bring joy and inspiration to others, she organized small exhibitions and art workshops for children, helping them express themselves and discover their potential. Jonathan encouraged her every step of the way, proud of the compassion and creativity she displayed. Together, the siblings began to understand that their experiences, though difficult, had given them empathy and the ability to positively influence the lives of others. Throughout this time, Jonathan maintained a strong, supportive presence in their lives. He celebrated achievements, offered guidance during challenges, and provided emotional support when needed. He also allowed them independence, teaching them to make decisions and learn from the consequences. The balance of support and freedom helped the children grow into self-reliant, confident young adults, ready to face the world with resilience and hope. One day, Jonathan received a call from Amir, who was now preparing for university. Amir wanted to share an idea he had been working on, a foundation to help underprivileged children access education and essential resources. Jonathan listened as Amir explained his vision, impressed by the clarity and purpose in his voice. He realized that the boy who had once been hungry and alone had grown into a compassionate, the determined young man who wanted to make a difference in the lives of others. Jonathan knew that this was the ultimate success. It was not just about providing food, shelter, or education. It was about instilling values, confidence, and hope. The impact of a single act of noticing, caring, and committing had rippled outward, touching countless lives. The children had transformed not only their own futures, but also the futures of others who would benefit from their efforts. Amir's sister had also grown into a young woman with dreams and ambitions. She planned to continue her studies in the arts, hoping to inspire and empower others through creativity. Jonathan encouraged her to follow her passion, reminding her that her voice mattered and that she had the power to create change. Her confidence and determination were a testament to the nurturing and guidance she had received. Combined with her own resilience and talent, Jonathan reflected on his journey with the children. He had started with a simple act of kindness, but what had followed was a lifetime of commitment, growth, and transformation. He had learned that wealth and success were meaningful only when used to create positive impact. He had witnessed the power of human connection, the strength of resilience, and the lasting effects of empathy and guidance. Amir and his sister had grown into capable, compassionate individuals, and Jonathan knew that their futures were bright in the quiet moments. Jonathan often thought about the day he first saw Amir on the street. The memory of hunger in the boy's eyes, the silent plea for help, the fragile hope had been the catalyst for everything that followed. He realized that sometimes a single moment of attention and care could change the course of a life, and that the willingness to act, to commit, and to guide could have far-reaching consequences. As Amir and his sister prepared to step fully into the world as independent young adults, Jonathan felt a mix of pride, joy, and quiet humility. He had been part of their journey, yes, but he had also learned from them the courage, resilience, and compassion of two children who had faced immense challenges, yet emerged stronger and more determined than ever. He knew that their story was only beginning and that the lessons they had learned would guide them for the rest of their lives. Jonathan understood that this was more than a story of charity or intervention. It was a story of transformation, trust, and human connection. He had seen how noticing someone in need, showing empathy, and committing to meaningful action could change not just individual lives, but entire futures. He also understood that his own life had been enriched in ways he could never have anticipated. The children had given him purpose, perspective, and a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to make a difference. Years later, when Amir's foundation began to help countless children access education, food, and opportunities, Jonathan would watch with quiet pride. He knew that the impact of his initial kindness had multiplied, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined. The siblings, who had once been alone and struggling, had become beacons of hope, demonstrating the power of compassion, resilience, and determination Jonathan often reflected on the journey. Understanding that life was not just about what one achieved for oneself, but about what one could do to lift others, to create lasting change, and to instill hope where there had once been despair. The hunger he had seen in a child's eyes so many years ago had ignited a chain of events that changed the course of lives forever. And in that, he found the deepest sense of fulfillment, knowing that one small act of noticing and caring could truly make the world a better place.